Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Moscow. We have lots of important statements. The Kremlin has not yet disclosed the composition of the Russian delegation at the talks in Istanbul. The Russian delegation will be in Istanbul on Thursday and will wait for the Ukrainian side. Another important article was published by the Washington Post. The Russian delegation to the talks in Istanbul will include Foreign Minister Lavrov and Presidential Advisor Ushakov. Direct talks between Putin and Zelensky are unlikely. Meanwhile, Roman Abramovich was noticed in the Kremlin. In 2022, he already took part in negotiations with Ukraine. Another important statement. The topics are the Istanbul talks will cover issues of sustainable settlement and realities on the ground. These are the key words, realities on the ground, including the issue of territories. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov reported, Russia is ready to conduct negotiations responsibly, but doubts that the other side or other side's willingness to reach agreements, he noted. Another important statement, the Russian Federation sees that Moscow's geopolitical opponents are hatching dreams and plans for a change of government in Russia. That was stated by the head of Russian intelligence service Naryshkin. And most likely, when he made this statement, first of all, he was talking about attempts of the Western countries to force the president of the Russian Federation to go to the territory of NATO, to the city of Istanbul himself. When talking about Ukraine, Zelensky continue arguing that he has rights to have negotiations, to hold negotiations with Russia. Only I have the right to talk to Putin, that was stated by Zelensky. The Ukrainian president says that the decree of the National Security and Defense Council prohibits others from negotiations with the Russian president, but he did not prohibit himself from doing anything. Nevertheless, the decree he signed clearly states to state an impossibility of holding negotiations with the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. There are no exceptions in it. I'm ready to do everything so that the meeting with Putin takes place, he says. So as you can see, this is very important statement because currently it's not even important whether the talks between Russia and Ukraine are going to take place on Istanbul or not. The most important thing that the Russians told us many times before, that they don't care who will take part in these negotiations. They don't care who they will talk with. The most important for the Russian side is who is going to sign agreement between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And most likely, and according to the Russian side, Zelensky doesn't have this right. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, because while the Russians and the Ukrainians are trying to start these talks, the Russians continue their offensive operation along the entire line of combat contact, and during the previous 12 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly. And first, let's talk about the Bogatyr direction. As for now, the Ukrainians are still there. The Ukrainians still control the most western part of the settlement, trying to hold these lines for as long as possible. But due to the latest changes, we see that the situation for the Ukrainians is very difficult. According to neutral mappers, according to pro-Russian resources, and according to pro-Ukrainian sources, during the previous 24 and 12 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly. As you can see, according to these changes, the Russians took under complete control the most northwestern part of the settlement, and this is very important because this part of the settlement controls the bridge, controls probably the only safe road that Ukrainians used to have for evacuation and rotation, basically for retreating from the settlement of Bogatyr. But now we see that according to several mappers, the Russians took this territory under complete control. Now the Ukrainians still have possibilities for evacuation and for retreat, but now they need to do this in the western direction through the fields and open space, which means that their losses are going to be very heavy. Furthermore, according to information we have and according to several mappers, the Russians managed to take under control this company stronghold that is located to the south of the settlement of Bogatyr. This is the most important stronghold, and now we see that this territory is under complete Russian control, and we have no doubts that these upcoming 24 hours are the last 24 hours for the Ukrainian contingent on the territory of this settlement. Furthermore, the Russians continue advancing in the direction of the settlement of Kamar. The Russians are trying not to break through the Ukrainian defense, but to cut N15 road between the settlements of Odradne, Bogatyr, and of course the settlement of Kamar. If the Russians are able to do this, then Ukrainians most likely would be caught in cauldron without any possibilities for evacuation. Now let's move further, and the most important and the most interesting updates during the previous 24 hours we are receiving from the settlement and from the Pokrovsk direction. Today we got additional changes on the ground on the eastern flank. And telling the truth and summarizing everything that we have received during the previous 24 hours, we can make a conclusion that the eastern flank of the Pokrovsk agglomeration has collapsed. Now let's discuss this in details, and let's first of all compare the map between the dates. This is the situation on the ground by the end of the 11th of May of 2025, and this is approximately the moment when the Russians began their major offensive operation with the purpose to take under complete control several villages and towns on the eastern flank of the city of Pokrovsk. This is the situation by the end of the 12th of May. As you can see, the Russians managed to take under complete control this reservoir. By the end of the 13th of May of 2025, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes, the armed force of the Russian Federation managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Mykhailivka. Furthermore, during the 13th of May of 2025, probably at the end of the 30th of May, we got several geolocations and videos from the settlement of Mykhailivka. And by the morning of the 14th of May, we got additional changes on the ground and additional videos that confirms Russian complete control over this territory. So this is the video with Russian flags. In this video, we can see how Russians were raising Russian flags in different parts of the settlement of Mykhailivka. In the eastern part, in the central part, and probably almost in the most western part of the settlement. Based on this video and based on these flags, we have adjusted the map and we have colored almost entire territory of the settlement of Mykhailivka. Later, this morning on the 14th of May of 2025, we got this video that was published by the Ukrainian side. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians in this area, and on the 36th second of this video, we can see a building. This is it, the building that was damaged and destroyed by the Ukrainians as a result of FPV drone attacks. This video was geolocated, and in this video, in this moment, we can see even Russian soldiers. So these are the Russian soldiers. As you can see, they are moving probably on the back street of this building. Ukrainians attacked this structure construction, and this construction was destroyed, and this construction was geolocated. This is exactly the building that was destroyed by the Ukrainians, and this is exactly the place where the Russian soldiers were noted. And based on this video, we have adjusted this map further in Russian favor. So as we can see, the Russians managed to break through Ukrainian eastern flank of the Pokrovsk agglomeration, and we see that the Russians continue advancing. And most likely during the upcoming 24 hours, the Russians will continue advancing further in the northwestern direction towards the settlement of Mykhailivka and Mykhailivka. The Russians will continue advancing along N32 road in the direction of the village of Mirne, and most likely the Russians will try to shorten the lines and to take under complete control dense network of fortifications in this pocket between the settlements of Mykhailivka and Mykhailivka. We are talking about this area. So we expect that in the very, very near future, this territory would be taken by the Russians completely without any chances for the Ukrainians to restore control over this territory. And this is going to be a very powerful and strong foothold for further offensive operation. So as we discussed in the previous videos, most likely the Russians during the late May or early spring campaign will try to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Mykhailivka. If the Russians are able to do this, then we see that Ukrainians will have no chances to hold their lines in the side of the Pokrovsk agglomeration, because from this very moment, the Ukrainians on the territory of the Pokrovsk agglomeration would be caught in operational encirclement or probably even in cauldron. The Russians will establish complete FPV drone control over the main supply lines, and Ukrainians will start suffering losses. At the same time, pro-Ukrainian sources, Deep State made very interesting adjustments on their map. And as you can see, they have expanded the gray zone in the northern direction. So according to Deep State, the Russians during the previous 24 hours carry out several offensive operations in the northern direction with the purpose to outflank the settlement of Novopoltavka from the west. So summarizing everything that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians are trying to advance in the northern direction as well, probably with the purpose to take this settlement under complete control and to improve their positions along N32 road. So the situation here for Ukrainians is very critical, and we see that the Russians are trying to intensify their attacks before the beginning of talks on Thursday of the 15th of May of 2025. We have some doubts whether the Russians and the Ukrainians are able to get any agreement tomorrow, but obviously the situation is going to get worse and worse during the special military operation. Also, we got another very interesting video from the settlement of Mykhailivka. According to information we have, the Russians improved their positions in this pocket between reservists, and the Russians continue advancing further along N32 road in the northern direction with the purpose to take Mykhailivka under complete control and to get as close as possible to the settlement of Yablunovka from the west. So obviously this attack is something like a very unexpected maneuver. The Ukrainians never expected that the Russians could attack the Ukrainian positions from the west, and if it happens, most likely the entire Ukrainian defense line will collapse automatically. We have this geolocation, we have this video where we can see how Ukrainians were bombing Russians along this tree line. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map. At the same time, we see that the Russians continue advancing in the direction of the pocket, of this Kliban-Byksky pocket. During the previous 24 hours, according to different mappers, the Russians managed to improve their positions on the southwestern flank of this pocket. The situation for the Ukrainians is very difficult, and as we discussed in the previous video, the armored force of the Russian Federation managed to significantly improve their positions on the territory of the city by the name of Chasiv Yar. We have geolocations from the central citadel where we can see how Ukrainians were attacking with artillery and with drones the edge positions of the armored force of the Russian Federation. This moment took place exactly in this area. Ukrainians were attacking exactly this building. Based on this video, we have adjusted the central part. So we see that probably there are still some pockets of resistance in the central part of the city of Chasiv Yar, but we see that the battle for this city, for the most important part of the city, is coming to the end. And that's it for today, for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.